Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the Best on Wellbeing podcast. Today, I want to talk about envy and really kind of get a little personal and share my journey with envy. Envy is a tricky little thing. It's not quite as strong or intense as jealousy, but it is kind of an undertone, something that we are pulled towards on a regular basis. As humans, we have a natural tendency to want to compare ourselves and compare ourselves to others. And we all know it's not the greatest thing, and perhaps not conducive to our health, but we all kind of do it anyways because we've been evolved to do it. And so it can get quite tricky to manage this tendency to be envious, to look upon others and cope with this feeling that someone is sort of higher up in the hierarchy of some sort of social strata, whether it's envy over finances, you know, occupation, family structure, looks, athleticism. There's just an ongoing list of ways in which people can be envious of each other and ways in which they can compare with each other. And envy is, at the end of the day, learning to transcend envy, to move beyond envy, is really an amazing thing in terms of our well being. Now, when we talk about envy, the normal tendency, the most common way that people want to cope with envy is what we call downward social comparison. So this basically means that if there's somebody that's sort of higher up than you in terms of whatever the hierarchy you are on, looks, finances, social status, whatever. One way that people cope with it is like, okay, well, that person's above me and I'm a bit envious of that, but look at all these people below me. So in order to cope with the feeling that someone's, quote unquote, ahead of you in some regard, we compare ourselves to people that are below us in the same regard. And that sort of gives us a little bit of a reprieve from the feeling of envy. And we can do this with other people, but even with, let's say, a specific person that we notice, we experience a certain envy. And I don't think this is like a very conscious intent, process where we have the intent of doing this. It's just kind of a little bit of an automatic cognitive process. But with people that let's say, even with a certain person that might be higher up, we might say, okay, well, that person's higher up than me for this and that, but I'm higher up than them for this or that. So that, on one dimension of the hierarchy, they're higher, but on another dimension, they're lower. So that kind of reassures us. So this downward social comparison. And, there's some ways to look at this, that it's not such a bad thing. It can be okay to do that, especially maybe people with very low confidence, a lot of difficulty with that kind of thing. A little bit of downward social comparison or making people appreciate where they're at in their status in life can be a good start. But I think for most of us that are functioning relatively well in society, it it can be a mechanism to sort of numb the feeling of envy, or I would call it it's more of a type of analgesic. It sort of reduces it temporarily, but you don't really transcend or move past envy on a deeper, sort of more fundamental way. And that's what I want to talk about today is, what's the antidote to envy? I've experienced envy so many times in my life and still do today. And so this mechanism I'm sharing, I wouldn't claim to have mastered it, but certainly I find it very much of a whole other approach than trying to find ways to find people that are below me in order to soothe myself about people that are above me. I had this very particular experience that I remember when I was a nursing student. I was working at a hospital as a clerk, and I was going through my studies to become a nurse at the time, probably 20 years old or something like that. And this guy walks in to the unit that I was working on, and he was a little bit taller than me. He was a little bit more muscled and bigger shoulders, just very handsome. So he's like just a very striking guy. I was like, oh, okay. And then next thing I know, I find out he's a fourth year resident in surgery as a general surgeon. So and I just remember being like overwhelmed by this like envy. Like this guy is like he's probably smarter than me. He's more handsome. He's bigger. He's taller. He looks stronger, and he's going to be rich one day compared to me being a nurse one day. And it just went on. I was like, and my brain was just overwhelmed with this envy. And then it was the weirdest thing where all of a sudden a part of me was wishing that he wasn't nice, that I wanted him to not be nice, so that I could at least within this downward social comparison. Well, he's got looks, he's got finances, work, social status, blah blah blah. He's got everything on me, but I'm probably nicer than him. I'm nicer than him. It was just a weird lower, kind of a very lower nature of me coming out, that wishing for someone else to not be nice so that I could claim that in my downward social comparison within my head. And then he comes up to me and he's like such a polite, unassuming. He's like, "Hi, hey, how's it going?" He's like, I just need some, if you don't mind, I was hoping to get some labs printed for the patient so and so. And so it was a very gentle, kind interaction. I'm like, and usually like when someone's nice like that, it's like, it's pleasant and it's fun. And then this moment, I'm like, no, I don't like this. I don't, like, part of me was just like almost exhausted by this envy. It was just like, he's nice too. What the heck? I got nothing on this guy. So I don't know. That one particularly stands out in my memory of like when I was really overwhelmed with envy, and it just was very acute and intense. Um, but what I want to talk about is, so we've talked about oneness today, and not today. We've talked about oneness in other episodes, and this idea of starting to erode the sense of my personality, my individuality being the absolute only sense of of self. The only sense of how you perceive yourself is just this thing, this person that's was born and is going to die, and it's this personality and it's within a certain social rank or whatever, and that's it. And learning to go deeper than that into how we perceive ourselves, to go into the depth of that, a deeper sense of self, of I. And one analogy is the ocean. Like that the individual is the wave, but there's the ocean and the wave. And the waves come up and they come down, and there's different waves. There's big waves, there's little waves, there's waves that are very perfectly symmetrical, and there's waves that are bizarre shapes and they crash into one another, and some just come up and come down uneventfully, some make a big splash. There's all sorts of waves. And the analogy is that we are the waves, but if you start to consider that analogy, you're not separate from the other waves. The same essence is within you. We're like, all the waves are essentially the ocean. And the ocean, it's the ocean that emerges at the surface as waves. And the waves are what's happening with us is we're the wave, but we've forgotten that we're the ocean. We think ourselves only as the wave. And so it's very scary because we're very temporary. The wave is very temporary, and we are very temporary as humans. And it will come and we're going to go. And that's can be a scary thought if we see ourselves only as the wave. But when the wave starts to see itself as the ocean and starts to get a sense of its more vast sense of existence, it's much more vast. It's a vast sort of timeless existence that underlines this very temporary, very single sense of individuality. There's a much deeper sense of what is our true sense of self, which is the ocean. So that's an analogy. And my point here is that with envy, oneness isn't just some flu idea of, okay, it's nice, we're all one, this is nice, it's cool. It's very practical. It's a very practical approach to day-to-day life. And it's truly the antidote to envy. Another experience I had one time where it was related to my sister. I think I was a little tired that day, and I was coming home from work. I had just started my career as a nurse. At this point, like a few years later, maybe 23 or something, starting to be a bedside nurse. And I guess I was just tired, and my brain just got caught in this like envy thing, where I'm running and moving patients and hanging up IV bags and charting and medication orders and stuff like that. And it was a lot of hustle, and I was little getting used to it. Um, and then this sort of envy thing started to take over my head, and my about my sister. My sister's a successful surgeon and very nice woman and has a beautiful family. Um, and this envy thing started to come, like, really take me over, and I was just like, okay, well, I don't really want to compete in my head with my sister. Like, I don't want to start like, okay, well, she's good at this, but I'm good at that. And like, I just felt exhausted. But then it's just like, I had been practicing a little bit this sort of these concept of oneness and ocean versus the wave and things like that. And then it's like, I turned to first, like, I started just deep breaths and just calm my system down. And then I started to look at a tree, and then sort of sense that its essence is my essence. And then, like, the mind kept coming down a little bit, and then next thing you know, I kind of feel like this tree and I truly are the same essence. We're the waves of the ocean. And this sense of, it wasn't like, I'm not trying to like this enlightening experience. I don't want to overblow it here. Like, it was this like an amazing experience, but it was gentle, and it was just, and all of a sudden I go back to the thoughts of my sister, and the sense of envy was gone. It was just like, we're waves in the ocean, and that's it. It's just, we're all one thing, and this beautiful wave that's my sister has just come up a certain way, and this wave that is this Guillaume has come up a certain way, and there's a gazillion waves around me that we're all emerging from the same ocean. And then it felt more like this sense of curiosity of like, I wonder what her next success will be, or what her next challenge will be, or what her journey is. Like, it became more this sense of curiosity and wonder, and envy was just, it wasn't like I shoved down or numbed. It was transcended. It felt like this oneness gave me the antidote to envy. And so it really felt like a really clear way to move forward with envy. And it's not to say that since then I've never experienced envy. And like, to today, like, it catches me all the time. But there's a way forward where it's not about pushing it down or using ways to compare ourselves with others to make ourselves feel better about other people. It's just a way to see totally beyond it, to transcend it, to move completely past it. And then obviously this can take practice and repetition, but it is truly an antidote to envy. Thank you, folks. We'll see you next time.